Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Thursday morning to you all. Hope you guys are doing well out there and having a great start to your day. Great work week out there so far. Got you a big update this morning. It's going to be a little different than what we typically do in the morning videos. We're not going to really break down each section of the country. We're really going to focus in a lot on what's going to happen tomorrow. In fact, most of the video will be on what happens tomorrow. I feel like it's very important to keep updated information ongoing for you guys, and that's why we do 2 videos a day. And I feel like that's especially important leading up to a big event like what we're going to have tomorrow. Tomorrow could be a high-end event, the biggest event since last Friday. And really, you go back to last Friday, really it was only one storm that caused a massive issue. And we all know what happened in Mississippi. This definitely looks to be more widespread. We talked about it being bimodal, which means there's going to be 2 areas that are going to have some high-end ingredients for damaging winds and tornadoes. So we're going to talk about it in this video. We're going to break down on like individual states and regions. We're going to zoom in on these areas and we're going to try to figure this out for you guys. And then we'll do it again tonight. And then we'll do it again tomorrow morning ahead of the events. But I can tell you, the short-range model guidance are really showing exactly how I wouldn't say exactly how it's going to unfold, but it makes sense with the ingredients in play. And so we'll talk about what we're seeing out there. If you folks have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. Hit me up on Twitter. When I'm not chasing, I'm constantly retweeting people's information. I'm constantly making updates, especially leading up to these events. I'm active on Facebook too, but I'm not near as active on Facebook as I am Twitter. But it's a great way to follow along. I know more people have Facebook over Twitter, but hit me up there if you want to. And if you guys got anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put those in the comments. I understand a lot of people suffer from storm anxiety, and rightfully so. With it just seems like we've been under the gun a lot this year already. So certainly praying for everybody who has that, and just everybody who's worried, and anything else you got going on, put it in the comments below, and we'll pray for you. And not just me, but everybody else will too. I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I can tell you a lot of people will. So let's get rolling this morning. Water vapor loop. We always start off by looking at this. Here it is. It's not as stout of a spin, but you can tell this is a massive mid to upper level trough digging in. And as this digs in across the west, what's going to happen is a surface low is going to develop somewhere. Well, it's already developed, but it will eject off the Rockies into the plains. And then it might not strengthen immediately, but it will begin to strengthen substantially. Probably somewhere in Nebraska, maybe into Iowa, into southern Minnesota. As it strengthens, the dynamics really reach high-end levels. And when a storm is strengthening like this, it becomes very dynamic. So, and we'll talk about what all that means in this video. But this is our system right here. It's creating a lot of weather out west. In fact, we'll look at watches, warnings, a lot of winter weather advisories, some winter storm warnings, winter storm watches have been reissued up for the Pacific Northwest. But if you look down here, you got wind advisories, you got high wind watches up here in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia, the hills of Pennsylvania, and the mountains of western Maryland. And winter storm watches ahead of the cold side of this, which we won't talk a ton on. And we'll talk about that tonight for you folks. I know I got people up here that are wondering about the winter weather. We'll talk about a little bit on today. In fact, the very beginning of this video will be, well, I can't say the beginning of the video. We're already in the beginning of the video. But a portion of the beginning part of this video, we'll be talking about how the winter weather can unfold today in these areas of the country. But winter storm warnings up for areas of northern and northeast Wisconsin. Winter weather advisories for portions of northeast Minnesota. But you see these red flag warnings. This is basically here because low pressure is going to fly to the north. A lot of strong winds, but with no moisture. So you're going to have a fire danger. Wind advisory is already up. And I would suspect this gets upgraded to maybe a high wind warning in certain areas where there's wind advisories. So high wind warnings here in this mustard color right here. So a lot going on, and this is just the beginning stages. This will probably become more colorful as far as more watches and warnings, advisories, things like that in time. Let's talk about today really quickly. There's 2 marginal risks. One up here where a surface low will begin to eject off the Rockies into the plains. And as this does, you're going to have a severe weather threat near the low pressure. And then a conditional severe weather threat down here in Oklahoma, North Texas, and then a large portion of eastern and southeastern Kansas. So we'll see what happens. It really looks like some storms will get going later this evening up here. Down here, it's a tougher call. If anything does get going, it could become severe. Right now, just a 2% risk of a tornado as far as a tornado threat within 25 miles at any given point here in this portion of Oklahoma and North Texas. This does include bigger cities like Oklahoma City, towns like Wichita Falls up to Tulsa. So we'll talk about how it can unfold today, and we're not going to stay on this very long, but I don't want to just ignore today. Okay, so in Oklahoma, here we go. We got some convection kind of blowing through eastern Oklahoma, but not really in the form of storms. As we get into this afternoon, I'm talking about 3-4 p.m., some of this could be in the form of storms in North Texas near Wichita Falls and around the Red River. And some storms could develop down here, but they're going to have a hard time getting going with low pressure way to the north. Lack of just oomph to the atmosphere is going to prevent a massive widespread storm event down here. But as we're getting into 6-7 p.m. tonight, some storms could get going down here in southern, southeast Oklahoma. These could produce maybe a spin up. We'll certainly watch, but not a big threat. And then we get into the overnight hours, and then we get into tomorrow morning, and that's pretty much it down here. But up here, certainly could get more intense later tonight. But as we're working our way through the morning, maybe some snow showers drifting through the northern half of Minnesota, not a big deal. Snow becomes more widespread in portions of the upper Midwest and Minnesota, maybe around the snow blasting through North Dakota, but we're really focusing on the severe weather. Here we go. Around, I would say 7-8 p.m., there could be a lone storm or two that develops in kind of east central Nebraska. This could produce some nasty weather, damaging wind threat, and you can't completely rule out a tornado threat in this region. So please watch out for these storms a little bit later tonight, later this evening, 8-9 p.m. in this area. And these will work their way through portions of northeast Nebraska, southeast South Dakota, and then northwest Iowa, and then they'll try to work their way even into southern Minnesota, and then eventually they'll kind of work their way into cooler air, and you could have almost some convective in nature freezing rain and sleet that gets going maybe in South Dakota and then sections of southern Minnesota. So, and then the snow starts to crank up on the northern side, low pressure moves in, and we won't talk about that too much right now. So just making you guys aware, there will be a little bit of a severe weather threat in this portion of the country right here. So please be careful tonight in those areas I just mentioned. So there will be a little bit of some winter weather today. Not a little bit, but a good bit. I mean, as we get going into this afternoon, late this afternoon into around dinner time, an area of not just snow, but heavy snow breaks out over northern Wisconsin, gets into the UP of Michigan, overspreads the entire UP of Michigan, and there could be a corridor of kind of a wintry mix somewhere in this area of Wisconsin where certain sections could get some freezing rain, some sleet, substantial freezing rain too for, late March standards. The last couple of days of March, there will be a corridor of sleet also. And but where it's snowing, this will be a heavy wet snow, as it typically is this time of the year. I mean, we're almost in April. It'll fall pretty quick, pretty furious. You probably will have maybe a flash of lightning, rumble of thunder up here. Would not be surprised at all. And look at these storms right nearby. Okay, and this is getting into 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and then we're waking up tomorrow with a lot of rain blasting through Michigan, Indiana, and portions of western Ohio. But this really won't be that severe. I think this will be just more so heavy rain with some rumbles of thunder, but it is snowing very hard. But there's a big gradient. Like Green Bay will get mostly rain out of this, but you go up into the UP of Michigan, heavy snow with a wintry mix possible. Between now and the next just 24 hours, a few inches of snow is possible, anywhere from northeast Minnesota all the way into northern Wisconsin, and then basically the entire UP of Michigan. 2, 3, 4 inches of snow is possible. But check out the freezing rain totals. Okay? Some areas could get 0.3 of an inch of ice based off the National Weather Service forecast in northern Wisconsin. So please be aware of this. Okay? There is a freezing rain threat up here. You never like to see that any time of the year. Let's talk about the severe weather threat tomorrow. So I'm going to zoom in on all the risk categories for your specific region of the country if you're watching and obviously worried about your neck of the woods. What we do know is we kind of mentioned this yesterday. There was going to be two modes that really need to be watched. One, the northern mode and the southern mode. This one, okay, both have a tornado risk. The southern one is the higher end tornado risk, but both a substantial, and I'll show you the risk categories here in a second. But this one is going to be kinematic driven. Both are going to have high end kinematics. This will have higher kinematics. There'll be a bigger damaging wind threat with this. That's what I mean by kinematics. It's a favorable wind pattern aloft to put a spin to the atmosphere, yes, but there's a lot of moving parts in the upper levels of the atmosphere, meaning above our heads. The winds are going very quick, especially in the upper levels. I'm talking about 10, 20,000 feet up in the air, but even a mile above our heads in these areas, winds are pushing at interstate speed. So, and down here, thermodynamics are better, which means, and I'm explaining this again because I'm not going to go over all the ingredients again in this video. I might do it tonight, but we're in the mode where we can really talk about the evolution of these storms. The southern extents, you will have a broad, low-level jet and a strong one, but you will have better thermodynamics, better surface heating, better surface moisture meaning how high are your dew points. They'll be well into the 60s into this area. So you're going to have plenty of moisture for these storms to fuel off of. In response to the higher dew points, you have higher CAPE levels in this region. Therefore, when you have the best overlapping of dynamics, which I think will be right here, because you're lacking thermodynamics up here, that's where your highest tornado threat normally always is. So let's zoom into each area. This first area, and I do apologize, tonight I'm going to have Google Maps right up on my phone. Excuse me. And I'm going to try to mention some towns and communities in these risk areas because this might change somewhat too. Places like Chicago, you're in a slight risk. Milwaukee, slight risk. The entire southern section of Wisconsin, slight to enhanced. Once you work into the southwest part of the state, you have a higher chance for more severe weather. But this is the highest threat right here in this portion of eastern, southeastern Iowa, and then western and northwestern Illinois. Okay, in a very small section of Missouri right here and Wisconsin. But don't tunnel vision so much on that. Okay, and I'll talk about why here in a second. But a huge enhanced risk that expands all the way through, I would say, 90% of the state of Illinois. Okay, this does include like Bloomington. It includes down here into St. Louis, Missouri. And I would say 60% of Missouri. Okay, slight risk too. Slight risk includes Indianapolis. But guys, you guys will probably have a nasty line of storms that move through. And I'll talk about the evolution of the storms here in a minute that move through later at night. Same thing with Kentucky. And let's go on and move a little bit further south. This is the highest tornado threat right here. Okay, right down here in the moderate risk. This is, like I said, where your better thermodynamics will be. But you have a moderate risk for Memphis, the big city of Memphis. I mean, Jonesboro, Arkansas, the far southeast corner of Missouri. Enhanced risk. This does include Nashville, down to the entire northern half, the northern section of Mississippi. This does include Little Rock. Okay, so this includes a lot of people. Evansville, Indiana. All right, so let's go back up here. Let's talk about the tornado risk, day 2 tornado risk. So if you look at this area right here, this yellow area, that is a 10% risk of a tornado within 25 miles in a given location. But you notice all these lines going through it? That is a hatched risk, which means not only do you have a 10% risk of tornadoes in this entire area right in here, but you also have a 10% risk of strong tornadoes. That's EF2 or higher, okay? In the same area, wind threat. Look at this. In the purple, you have a 45% hatched risk area. It means you have a 45% risk to see strong winds, damaging winds in excess of 50 knots or higher within 25 miles at any given point. That's almost a 50-50 shot to see it in this region, okay? But you also have a hatched risk, which is a 10% risk to see significant severe winds, strong winds in this region, which is winds pushing 65 knots or higher, which is basically hurricane force winds or higher in this region. The entire red area, that is a 30% risk to see strong winds, to see strong winds in this area is in excess of 50 knots or higher, 55 to 60 miles per hour. But you also have a 10% risk outside of this purple area. So even in this red area, you guys also have that 30% risk to see damaging winds, but you also have a 10% risk to see significant winds, okay? So remember that. We won't talk much on the hail. The hail's not going to be a big story. We'll go back down here. Let's look at the tornado risk. This is when it gets dangerous. You have a 15% risk at day 2 to see a tornado within 25 miles in any given location. This does include Memphis. Includes this western section right here of Tennessee, far southeast Missouri, and the entire northeast corridor of Arkansas, and then small section of a very, very small section of southwest Kentucky. Okay, we can't ignore the brown area too. That is a 5% risk to see a tornado. But you also have the 10% risk in the yellow area surrounding the 15% risk like we always do. But remember, this is also a 10% risk to see a significant tornado, which is an EF2 or higher. This is a big deal. This is the thermodynamic driven region. You're going to have thermodynamics down up here too. You're going to have some surface moisture, just not as much, some surface heating, but this is where your best tornado threat's going to be, okay? And there will be a wind threat down here too, all right? There's a hatch risk for significant winds down here too, which is, remember, 10% risk of significant winds pushing 65 knots or higher, okay? And if I'm confusing you guys, the actual map is right here, the Storm Prediction Center. And here it is, 10% greater probability of wind gusts, 65 knots or greater within 25 miles at any given point, talking about the winds in the Hatch region right in here. This is just pivotal weather. It's just a different way to look at it, okay? Sometimes it's a tongue twister explaining it. So let's talk about the broad look of how these storms can unfold. So we're going to zoom into a couple areas, but first off, we'll take a broad look at it. All right, so what goes on, we'll start off tomorrow morning. Okay, you can already see the winter weather up here on the northern side of this low pressure. As we're getting, this is already, I would say, this is already about midday Friday. You already got some powerful storms developing in eastern Oklahoma and moving into Arkansas, okay? But really, it's what forms after this that are strong. But what I want you to see this is look how these storms right here. This is 1 hour to 1 hour. So nothing around 2 p.m., 3 p.m., bang, explosive storms developing in Iowa. These will be fast-moving, interstate-moving storms. They will come up on you quick here in Iowa. Down here in Arkansas and all these other areas I mentioned on the southern end, slower moving. But here, you're not going to have time to react. You got to be aware that severe weather's coming. But you already notice what's going on here. And I'm going to zoom in. Hold on. You got this mode up here, the northern mode, and the southern mode down here. There is a chance that someone right here in Illinois, Missouri, might not even see a thunderstorm out of this. And you're going to be that hopefully you're not that person who's going to say, we didn't even get anything, and you guys were calling for a significant chance of severe weather. Somebody could potentially not even get a storm. But if you do, it could be dangerous, okay? And I'm talking about you folks right into here. But here it is, cranking up. This is going to be a day event, so you're going to see this. This is not, there will be significant weather at night, but this will be unfolding when the sun is still way up in the sky. So you're going to see this. But look at these severe storms from northeast Texas all the way through Arkansas. So, and this will continue, turn into some kind of line of storms, broken up line of severe storms that might stretch all the way from northern Louisiana all the way through the Mid-South into the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and Great Lakes region. So let's zoom into these areas. Let's talk about kind of areas of Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois first. So start off tomorrow morning, and here we go. These storms begin to develop in these regions. When I tell you that these could be producing tornadoes very easily, I mean it. It's not gonna be super warm. It's not gonna be super moist up here, but you're gonna have so much wind energy up here in Iowa that listen, these storms are gonna be moving so quick because they're near the low pressure. When you're really close to that low pressure, your kinematics, all the winds are really, really strong. The dynamics are really maxed out in this region. And these storms will be dangerous, okay? They will have a chance to produce a tornado, and certainly there will be already strong winds out ahead of this. And these storms will quickly form. And, if you're in if you're in eastern Iowa, you need to be prepared for bad weather. Even southern Louisiana, I'm sorry, southern Wisconsin. You guys know I get my states twisted up. But those are two totally different states, so I don't know how I got that mixed up. But you keep this going. Let me get a sip of water real quick. I apologize for the interruption there. But you keep this going, and you see all these storms right in here. A lot of wind energy. Big tornado threat. 10% risk. Okay? But here's that little, I guess you would say, a dry slot, where maybe not a whole lot will happen. But this will quickly get filled in somewhere in Illinois. Damaging winds ongoing, okay, with these storms. Tornado threat still ongoing. At this point, it's around 6 p.m. It's getting to about 7 p.m. And I would say these storms that will be quite intense. There will be a hail threat with this too, because there's so much cool air nearby and dry air nearby that when you have a lot of cold air aloft, hail is easily maintained or obtained in these areas. So I would say some nasty storms will blast through Milwaukee, southern Wisconsin, Chicago, sometime around dinner time tomorrow night and move through. With these storms, guys, okay, there's already going to be strong winds. Let's go to the wind gusts in this region. So always already going to be very strong winds. And let's got to go back to my 06Z. Bear with me. So this is today. Let's go all the way into tomorrow. Already very strong winds ahead of this. But look at how strong. That's 114 mile per hour wind gust associated with this storm. So I'm telling you, there is going to be a tornado threat with this, but it's trying. I've never seen that. Unless it's hurricane season. The HRRR model is trying to say 114 mile per hour wind gusts with these storms right here. Look how strong. I'm sorry, guys. I was wondering why it was so high. I had it in another reading. This is miles per hour, but still, it's the same thing, guys. I mean, it's not 114 miles per hour. I do apologize. This is mile per hour readings here. 60, 70, 80 mile per hour winds in these storms in eastern Iowa. And look how windy it is down here in northern Missouri. 50, 60 miles per hour, even if it's not associated with storms. Very windy conditions. I mean, you might get a blizzard warning issued up here somewhere maybe in Wisconsin or Minnesota, okay? But very strong winds, and these will blast through the state of Illinois, southern Wisconsin, and you could get a damaging line of storms in this entire region right here tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow evening. Talking about the significant tornado parameter in this region, it is very high. Now, that doesn't mean just because you see a 10 on the screen that you got a 10 out of 10 chance to see a tornado. This tells us that the parameters are high for a tornado threat. You know, this is around 3-4 p.m. and look at this. Very high in western Illinois, eastern Iowa, even getting into southern sections of Wisconsin in this region. I mean, look, a 12 into here. It really tells us that there is going to be a substantial tornado threat even on the northern end of this. Okay, it needs to be taken serious. I mean, look how high it is in northern Illinois. Okay, and that doesn't mean that you're going to get a tornado outbreak necessarily in northern Illinois. It just tells you, hey, the ingredients are there for tornadoes. All right, let's go on and take a little bit further south. Okay, my folks down here in Missouri. We'll move through this a little bit faster. Let's pick up a little bit of speed. Same thing. You know, we already got storms ongoing in the early afternoon hours in Missouri. These will make their way, in Arkansas. These will make their way into Missouri. And then they will kind of get some more growth to them down to the south. And look at all these hooks you see. Hook, 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 hook. That tells me that these are rotating thunderstorms. Remember, supercells have that kind of hook signature on it. And on that southern to southwest flank, that is normally where your tornado can be. Listen, I know I talk about how it's maxed out kinematics to the north, but when I tell you there's going to be a broad, and I'll talk about this here in a second, when I tell you there's going to be a broad, low-level jet, massive low-level jet that stretches from Texas to Michigan, I mean it. Okay, so just because I mentioned that the kinematics are better, which is all that wind energy, when I talk about low-level jet, mid-level jet, that's what I mean by kinematics. You're going to have plenty of ingredients as far as the favorable wind pattern for this. And that tells you, and it really goes to it, you know, when you see all these strong winds ahead of these storms, that should tell you right there that this you got tons of kinematics, tons of wind energy a lot. But these storms right here are going to be absolutely dangerous because you got better low-level moisture down to the south, better surface heating. The atmosphere destabilizes. You're going to have issues. So these storms continue, and they start to really have that look to them as they get this. I would say that the storm mode you might not have an outbreak of really discrete supercells. They could be kind of semi-discrete, meaning they're almost in a line like you're seeing right here. But it's kind of like what we saw in Mississippi. That was kind of in a line of storms. It was broken up, but you're going to have individual supercells embedded in this line, meaning you're going to have rotating updrafts and then a chance of those updrafts to produce a tornado. And these will blast through this area of northeast Arkansas. If you're wondering about the timing, back this up an hour because we're in Central Time. So they'll really get going around 4 p.m., prime daylight hours, okay? 5 p.m., 6 p.m., they start to work their way into Tennessee, western Kentucky, southern Illinois. We start to get into southern sections of Indiana. These storms really start to wreak havoc down here to the south. Same deal, guys. I mean, you're going to have a lot of strong winds in this region. Okay, let's see if we can switch it to miles per hour. A lot of strong winds in this region. Back it up to 06Z. So even ahead of these storms, look at these winds. These are wind gusts, not, sustained winds. But look how strong these winds are. Look at Missouri. Kansas City, tomorrow early afternoon, or even as early as around lunchtime, you are going to have a several hour period of 40 to as much as 70 mile per hour wind gusts blasting through the city. And you're probably not going to get, I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't get any storms. Okay, this is just going to be strong winds. But you will have a lot of storm development in this area of Missouri. This will begin to work its way through areas of Missouri into Illinois. But, there'll be strong winds down here associated with these storms. There'll be strong winds ahead of these storms, behind these storms, associated with these storms. This is around 6 p.m. You got a period of 45, 50, 55 mile per hour winds just blasting through most of the state of Missouri. So very, very windy. Even behind the storms. This is getting into about 10, 11 p.m. when the severe weather threats really ended for this area. Strong winds come in right behind it. Okay, now let's back this up. Let's look at the significant tornado parameter in this region. And check this out. Look at this. This entire area. Just, man, it's, I don't like to use the word scary, but it is kind of a scary look. It is. This entire area right here, you have a risk of a tornado. We don't know exactly who's going to see it, but I would favor this area right down here. And I know your immediate eyes go to the highest number or the most vibrant colors, but that doesn't mean that does not mean you're going to have the best chance to see a tornado. Sorry guys, I had to stop the video really quick because my little beagle was out there howling like a crazy dog out there. But anyways, let's keep it going. She just wanted to come in. She was a little cold. It's cold here in South Carolina this morning. But you keep this going. And like I mentioned, just because you see the most vibrant colors, like up here in Illinois, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have the highest tornado threat. That just means that the parameters are there, the ingredients are there for a tornado threat. But I would argue down here is going to be our highest tornado threat as we get late into the afternoon, into the early evening hours. We move a little bit further south, and we kind of already showed this, but we'll show it again. You'll back it up a little bit. I didn't mean to back it up that far, but like I said, we're getting into the late morning, early afternoon hours into tomorrow. Storms are already ongoing, and I would argue these are already severe, into eastern sections of Oklahoma, western sections of Arkansas, but it's really as we're getting into tomorrow afternoon. And I want to mention Northeast Texas. The models have consistently shown some nasty storms down here. Now, the thermodynamics will be really high down here, okay? So, if you're in Northeast Texas, please don't ignore the severe weather threat just because, you're not necessarily in the biggest threat. You only have a slight risk in Northeast Texas, but, you're going to have a chance of severe weather. In fact, I would say most of Northeast Texas could potentially see a good chance for some severe weather. But the motion of these storms are much slower than they are in Iowa. And they take a little bit of a tilt because why? Well, you're away from the low pressure, so storm motion slows down. But nasty storms will move through Memphis. This will be very impactful for you folks down here. Also, and they even get as far south as northern Louisiana as we're getting into about 7, 8 p.m. Shreveport, there will be a chance for severe storms late evening. And then this really begins to blast through areas of western Tennessee, northern and northwest Mississippi, as we're getting into later in the evening. After you got any outdoor activities, I wouldn't plan it, but definitely try to be done in these areas of Mississippi by about 6, 7 p.m. But I wouldn't even promote being out. But these storms will move through. They are going to have a tornado threat and definitely a damaging wind threat with these storms, okay? And then they move through and they really slow down into the overnight hours. Move a little bit further north into the Ohio Valley. Same kind of deal. Now, we already kind of talked about Illinois, but these storms will develop. They'll get going. And are we going to have more so just almost like a squall line moving through Illinois, Indiana? Or is this going to be kind of a broken up area of storms? This is actually more worrisome in my opinion. We already talked about this segment up here, but if you look down here, you see how this kind of has these little hooks? That tells me that even though it's just kind of a line of storms, to me, just looking at the HRRR model really tells me that these storms are probably spinning out here. Okay, so there's going to be embedded spin-ups in this just congealed convection, this kind of broken up line of storms. All right, Evansville, watch out. And I know I always just mention Evansville. I don't pretend to know every single town or community in like the southern sections of Illinois, Indiana. But if you're in Indianapolis, which I definitely think needs to be mentioned, a lot of people live there, there isn't going to be a severe weather threat. I can tell you strong winds will already be a threat. But how intense will the storms be up here in kind of the central and northern Indiana area? I think the jury's still out. We need to see a couple other runs of the HRRR model. But you keep this rolling. Strong winds. I'm going to keep saying this. This is getting into late evening hours Friday. I'm talking about 10, 11 p.m. into midnight Friday night. Strong winds accompanied by any heavy rain, any storms, ahead of the storms, along the storms, behind the storms. But the further south I think you get into, I would say, western Kentucky, western Tennessee, that is where your highest tornado threat will be embedded with these storms. But these will continue to blast through. These will start to make their way into the southern Appalachian region areas into the wee hours of the morning, and we'll show that. Here comes these storms blasting through the area. And I think these storms could pack a punch, and this is as far out as the HRRR model goes. It goes out to about 1 or 2 a.m. Saturday morning, and knocking on the door of Huntsville, Alabama, making their way through Nashville just after midnight, and then heading towards the southern Appalachian Mountains here. And these will maintain strength, but they will be losing some steam, but they will still have the chance to, produce very strong winds overnight for these regions also. So really what's driving this is this massive low-level jet. If you had a displacement of the low-level jet away from all these thermodynamics down here, the severe weather threat, I would argue, wouldn't be as bad for the south. But it is huge, and I'll show you what I mean. Let's go all the way to about the prime heating of the day. That's around 4 p.m., 5 p.m. in this entire risk area. You got a low-level jet stretching from areas of Texas all the way into the Ohio Valley. And look at these pockets right here of a low-level jet pushing 60 to 70 knots. With thermodynamics down here, dew points in the mid to upper 60s, Cape levels over 1,000 joules per kilogram in certain areas, and just rocket fuel and all ingredients to produce tornadoes down here. Okay, and down right up here, same kind of deal. Very fast storm motion. And look at this little pocket right here of a higher low-level jet. Winds about a mile above our heads in these areas will be going at faster than interstate speeds. You will see the skies moving in the entire Midwest and Ohio Valley ahead of the storms tomorrow afternoon. This is a dangerous setup, guys. I'm sorry if I was sloppy in my delivery. I got kind of distracted with my dog barking outside. But we'll try to talk more about individual towns and cities. I know a lot of people say, Mitch, why don't you ever please mention this town, please mention this state. It's not intentional. It's just that, especially in a big event like this that covers multiple states, I got so much coming to my brain at one time that it's hard to just mention everybody. And I also don't pretend to know every geographical feature or town in every single state. And I hope to get a lot better with that, just the more that I keep chugging along and making videos. But pointers are great. Tell me some towns and communities that, certainly definitely have higher populated areas that maybe people don't know about a lot. I'm up for suggestions if they're presented in a respectful way. And that's the thing, is a lot of people in this world do not know how to present suggestions in a nice and respectful way. That goes with anything in life, not just weather. So up for anything, guys. Stay safe. This is serious. This is serious. Not trying to hype anything or scare anybody, but this is a serious threat. I'll be with you guys this evening. God bless and have a great day.